It was the kind of quiet birthday that made you second-guess your own significance. No streamers, no cake, not even a candle flickering in dimmed light. Just the soft tick of the wall clock and the clink of Clarabelle's heels as she stepped out of the kitchen, holding a box wrapped in silver paper and topped with a ribbon so tight it looked like it might snap under the weight of her expectation. She smiled as she held it out to me, that tight-lipped, perfectly composed expression she'd mastered through years of navigating cocktail parties and awkward in-law dinners. Her eyes were just a bit too wide, like she wanted to soak in my reaction but wasn't sure she could stomach it if I looked too long. She extended the box like it was a peace offering or maybe a test and said, "Happy birthday, Braxton." I took the box slowly, resting it on my lap. The velvet was soft, dark, the kind of expensive that whispers rather than shouts. There was something about the way she perched on the arm of the couch, watching me, fingers curled inward just slightly. I offered her a smile to ease the air, then peeled back the wrapping, lifting the lid to reveal a gold ring nestled in deep navy satin. It was simple, clean, no gaudy stone or ornate setting, just a flawless band with the faintest shimmer that caught the light like a promise. I tilted it toward me and caught the engraving inside the band, "For your forever." The words hit somewhere deep and quiet in my chest. Clarabelle had always known how to make grand gestures feel subtle. I looked up at her and smiled. "It's perfect," I said, and for a second, I meant it. She beamed. Not a full, uninhibited grin, Clarabelle didn't do those, but the kind of soft glow that flickered in her eyes and warmed the corners of her mouth. "I thought it suited you." Understated, but strong. I slid the ring onto my finger. It fit like it belonged there, snug but not tight. My skin didn't tingle. There was no strange premonition, just the quiet sound of her breathing across from me and the feel of cool metal settling against my skin. I raised my hand and studied it under the dim living room light. Feels like something I should have always had. Clarabelle tilted her head, a lock of hair slipping past her ear. "It's for the years ahead," she said softly. "You've worked so hard lately. I just wanted you to have something that reminded you you're not alone in it." She leaned forward, pressed a kiss to my cheek, and I let it linger. Her lipstick left a trace of cherry wine on my skin, and for the first time that day, I felt like the celebration was real. Just her and me. Quiet, simple, a moment suspended in our otherwise noisy life. We didn't need confetti or crowded dinners. Just this. We sat there for a while, sipping the wine she'd opened, something dry and expensive, the kind she always said tasted like potential. The television hummed in the background with a show neither of us watched. Her head found its way to my shoulder, and I let my hand rest over hers, fingers interlacing like they used to when we first dated. I remember thinking maybe this was us getting back to something we'd lost. Maybe the silence wasn't hollow, it was peace. Later, when she went to bed early, claiming a headache, I stayed behind in the living room. The ring caught my eye again in the dim light. I turned it slowly on my finger, reading the inscription one more time. "For your forever." There was something about the way it was worded, so absolute. Forever is a bold word. You don't just carve it into metal unless you're sure. I wondered what she meant by it. Was it hope? A plea? Or something else? Still, I felt oddly comforted. I told myself this was a new start, that maybe we'd passed through the storms and arrived at calmer waters. I ignored how long it had been since she'd touched me without prompting. I ignored the fact that last year's birthday was loud and full of people, and that this year it was just us and a ring. I ignored a lot of things that night. When I finally went to bed, she was already curled under the sheets, breathing softly. I slipped under the covers beside her and stared at the ceiling for a long time. I felt the weight of the ring pressing against my skin as I folded my hands over my chest. She stirred once in her sleep, reaching out and placing her palm on my arm like it was instinct, like some part of her remembered that we were supposed to belong to each other. I closed my eyes and let that be enough. In the morning, I woke up before the sun. The ring was still on my finger, cool against the warmth of my skin. Clarabelle was gone from the bed, already up, likely fixing tea or answering emails. She was always precise about her routines. I padded out to the kitchen, still a little bleary, and found a fresh cup of black tea on the counter, steam curling up into the still air. She turned from the sink and smiled. "Morning, birthday boy," she said. I kissed her temple and reached for the cup. The ring gleamed faintly as I lifted the mug. "Thanks again for the gift," I said. She nodded once, satisfied. "It's just the beginning," she said. I laughed, not knowing what she meant, not understanding that the beginning she referenced had nothing to do with love or celebration, and everything to do with an end she was already orchestrating. At first, it was just a whisper of something. A strange itch in my joints that came and went, like the echo of an old injury I didn't remember earning. It started in my knuckles, the kind of discomfort that made you clench and flex your fingers, trying to shake it loose. Then it moved to my knees, like the bones were grinding against each other without cushion. I told myself it was age. 38 wasn't ancient, but it wasn't 20 anymore. Maybe I'd slept wrong. Maybe I needed to stretch more, drink more water, eat better. All the usual lies we tell ourselves when our body starts issuing quiet warnings. The nausea came next. Not constant, just a wave here and there, creeping up like a tide you never see coming until it's already soaked your feet. It would hit in the middle of a meeting or when I bent down to tie my shoes. A twisting unease in my stomach, like something inside was off balance. Sometimes it passed quickly. Other times it lingered, wrapping itself around me like a fog. Clarabelle noticed before I said anything. "You look pale," she said one morning as I stumbled out of the shower, towel clinging to my hips and the mirror still fogged over. "You okay?" "Just tired," I muttered. "Didn't sleep well." She made me tea that morning. Something herbal and floral, smelling faintly of licorice and mint. I drank it while checking my emails, the steam curling into my nose as I tried to focus on a proposal due by noon. The nausea dulled after a few sips, or maybe I convinced myself it did. Clarabelle rubbed my shoulder and whispered, "You've always pushed yourself too hard, Braxton. Maybe take the day." But the day couldn't be taken. The business was in a precarious place. My co-founder Marcus had been acting strange, missing calls, delaying decisions. Investors were calling more often than usual, asking for updates, timelines, reassurance. I couldn't afford a sick day, not now. Still, her suggestion stayed with me. Rest. Take it easy. That wasn't like Clarabelle. She usually encouraged the grind. Hustle keeps the wolves away, she used to say when I worked late into the night. But now? She was lighting candles during dinner, running baths for me like we were on a second honeymoon, and every night, the tea waited on my nightstand like a ritual. Her care was almost too perfect. That's when the fatigue settled in. Not the kind you could sleep off. I'd wake up and feel like I hadn't rested at all. My legs ached. My arms felt heavy. Climbing stairs became a conscious effort. And my skin, it started to dry out, flake in places it never had before. My cheeks looked sunken some days, my eyes duller in the mirror. I Googled every symptom, cross-referenced it with everything from anemia to burnout. I made excuses. Bad diet, too much caffeine, not enough vitamins. Stress could do all this, right? Clarabelle hovered more with each passing day. She offered to call Marcus and reschedule meetings. She said my health mattered more than the business. I didn't know what to say to that. I appreciated the sentiment, but it didn't feel like her. Not the Clarabelle I married. She was always about ambition, progress, control. And now, she was handing me soft blankets and energy supplements like I was a patient. It unnerved me how easily I accepted it. One evening, after I came home early from the office, I collapsed onto the couch and closed my eyes for what I thought would be a moment. When I opened them again, the sun was gone and the room had dimmed. Clarabelle was standing over me, pressing the back of her hand to my forehead. "You're burning up," she whispered. "I'm going to make you that tea again, all right?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. My head felt stuffed with cotton. My muscles didn't want to cooperate. I watched her walk to the kitchen, her silhouette calm and graceful as always. There was no panic in her movements, no urgency, just methodical preparation. Kettle, cup, jar of herbs, honey. She handed me the mug, and I drank, not questioning it. I never had. Her tea always calmed my stomach, didn't it? I told myself I was lucky to have someone who cared like this, who stayed, who nurtured. But something about her smile as I sipped, just a flash of something I couldn't name, unsettled me. Later that night, I tried to work from bed. My laptop felt like it weighed 100 pounds. My fingers trembled on the keyboard. I ended up staring at the blinking cursor for half an hour before closing the lid and lying back down. Clarabelle joined me in bed a few minutes later, curling beside me with that gentle sigh she always made when she settled into sleep. "You're safe," she whispered against my neck. I didn't respond. Over the next few days, the symptoms intensified. I couldn't concentrate. I forgot names mid-sentence. I dropped my phone 3 times in one morning because my grip wouldn't hold. And still, Clarabelle smiled. Still, she made the tea. Still, she said I was just tired. "Let me take care of you," she insisted. "You've carried us for so long, Brax. Let me carry you now." I didn't argue. I didn't have the energy. But deep inside, something was shifting. A sliver of doubt. A crack in the comfort. I began to wonder why she never suggested a doctor. Why she dismissed the idea of tests or prescriptions. Why her remedy was always the same: rest, tea, and those little white pills she claimed were natural supplements. I began keeping track. A journal tucked into my briefcase. Symptoms, dates, what I ate, when I drank her tea. I circled days where the dizziness was worst. I noted nights when I felt oddly euphoric right before crashing into sleep. I traced patterns and still told myself I was being paranoid. But the body doesn't lie. And mine? Mine was begging me to pay attention. That was the beginning. Not of the sickness. I think that it started the moment I put on that ring, but of the awakening. The realization that maybe what I called love had become something else. Something colder. Something calculated. I just didn't know how deep it went. Not yet. I didn't mean to forget the ring. It wasn't some rebellious act or calculated move. I just left it on the bathroom sink. Slipped it off while washing my hands and didn't put it back on. That was all. A simple moment. But sometimes, the smallest things hold the loudest truths. That day, something changed. I didn't realize it right away. Not until late afternoon, when I was halfway through my second client call and noticed that the tight band of fatigue I'd been carrying for weeks had eased. The nausea that had made lunch feel like a punishment was absent. My thoughts were clearer. My limbs didn't feel like they were dragging cinder blocks. I felt like myself. It was jarring. By the time I got home that evening, my head was buzzing, not from dizziness, but from clarity. I walked into the house expecting the usual. Clarabelle humming softly in the kitchen, the smell of her tea already steeping, a kiss on the cheek followed by a gentle push toward the couch. Instead, she was standing at the bathroom door, staring down at the sink like it had cursed her. "Forget something?" she asked without looking at me. I followed her gaze and saw the ring sitting there, perfectly positioned like it was waiting to be judged. "Oh, yeah. I must have taken it off earlier," I said casually. "Didn't even notice." She turned slowly, her smile too rehearsed. "You always notice. You never take it off." I shrugged, trying not to let my voice tremble. "Guess I was in a rush." She said nothing for a moment, then picked up the ring and held it out to me. "Well, don't make a habit of it. It suits you." Her tone was light, but there was an edge beneath it, like a blade wrapped in silk. I took it from her and slid it back on, watching her closely. She smiled, then turned away to finish whatever she'd been doing. But I felt it again the moment the ring touched my skin. That shift. A crawling sensation under my skin. A sudden heaviness in my limbs. The return of that low, queasy churn in my stomach. That's when the thought came. Quiet at first. Almost absurd. What if it's the ring? It sounded like something from a cheap thriller. A paranoid fantasy. But my body didn't care about logic. It only knew what it felt. And something about that band of gold made my cells scream. I tried to dismiss it. Shake it off. I wore it through dinner, through Clarabelle's gentle questions about my meetings, through the evening silence that had become our routine. But that night, I tossed and turned. Every time I shifted, I felt the ring press against my finger like a shackle. At 3 a.m., I sat up in bed and slipped it off again. My head throbbed. My stomach was a knot. But within minutes of taking it off, I felt the pressure begin to lift. My breathing slowed. My mind cleared. I stared at the ring in my palm, its gold surface glinting in the faint moonlight streaming through our curtains. It looked so harmless. Beautiful, even. But I couldn't shake the thought. It wasn't just a symbol. It was doing something to me. The next morning, I put the ring in my coat pocket instead of on my finger. I told Clarabelle I wasn't feeling well and needed some fresh air. She offered tea. I declined. Her eyes flicked toward my hands. "No ring?" she asked. "Forgot again," I said with a forced chuckle. "Guess my head's still foggy." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "That ring means something, Brax. Don't treat it like an accessory." I nodded and kissed her cheek, then stepped outside before the tension could thicken. My hands were shaking by the time I reached the car. I drove without a destination, just letting the city unfold around me as my mind raced. Could it really be the ring? Could something so small have such an impact on my body? I found myself heading toward the industrial side of town, where pawn shops outnumbered coffee shops and people asked fewer questions. I parked outside a place called Diamond and Dust. The windows were streaked with grime, and a faded neon sign buzzed faintly above the door. Inside, it smelled like metal and mothballs. The man behind the counter looked like he'd been carved from stone, older, silver beard, hands like they'd fixed clocks or broken kneecaps. He didn't smile when I walked in, Just watch me with the kind of stillness that made you hyper-aware of your every movement. I pulled the ring from my pocket and placed it on the counter. Can you tell me anything about this? He didn't touch it. Just looked at it, then looked at me. Where'd you get it? My wife gave it to me, I said. He stared at it another moment, then slowly reached under the counter. Wait here, he said. He came back with a UV light and a small metal device I didn't recognize. He shone the UV over the ring first. Nothing obvious happened, but his frown deepened. Then he held the device over the ring, didn't even touch it. And the reader blinked to life, lights flashing red as numbers spiked. That's not just gold, he said quietly. There's something else in the alloy. My throat tightened. Like what? He didn't answer at first, just stared at the ring like it had insulted his mother. Then he said, I've seen this once before. A guy came in with something similar. Said his girlfriend gave it to him. Said he'd been sick ever since. Tests couldn't explain it. By the time they figured it out, he was in the ICU. Seizures. Organ failure. He almost died. The room spun around me. What do I do? I asked, barely above a whisper. He met my eyes for the first time. Go to the police. Now. And don't wear it again. I nodded slowly, then picked up the ring with a hand that didn't feel like mine. It weighed more than it should have, like it carried every unanswered question I'd been ignoring for weeks. I slipped it back into my pocket and thanked the man without really hearing myself speak. As I walked out into the cold air, my heart thundered in my chest. I didn't know exactly what was happening yet, but I knew one thing with absolute clarity. Something was deeply, terribly wrong. The air in the pawn shop was thick with dust and something metallic, the kind of smell that clung to the back of your throat. I stood there, watching the man behind the counter study the ring like it had insulted him. He hadn't touched it, not once. He just stared, arms crossed over his chest, his silver beard twitching slightly as his mouth worked around words he hadn't said yet. He asked where I got it. I told him, my wife, Clarabelle, a birthday gift. The moment I said it, his eyes narrowed. That's when he reached beneath the counter and pulled out the tools. The UV light clicked on with a quiet hum. He held it over the ring, his gloved hand steady. The glow revealed nothing obvious, no glowing streaks, no secret inscriptions, but I could see his jaw tighten. Then came the metal tester. He didn't even touch the ring with it, just hovered it close, and suddenly the screen on the device blinked, lights flashing red, the numbers jumping higher than I thought possible for something supposedly made of gold. That's not just gold, he said, voice low. He spoke like someone who'd seen this kind of thing before and didn't like being reminded of it. There's something else in the alloy. Something that shouldn't be there. What do you mean? I asked, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. I've seen this before, he continued. One time, years ago, man came in with a ring almost identical to this. Said it was a gift from his girlfriend. Said he'd been feeling off. Headaches, stomach problems, muscle pain. Nothing showed up on scans. Nothing blood work could explain. He thought it was stress, work, life. Same thing everyone thinks when their body starts to betray them slowly. Until he collapsed. By the time they figured it out, he was in the hospital. Seizures. His organs were shutting down. What was in it? I asked. He shook his head. Doctors said it was thallium. Rare. Tasteless. Odorless. It doesn't show up in basic tests. It mimics other conditions. You can be dying from it and think it's just a bad flu. And if you wear it close to your skin long enough. He let the sentence hang. The air between us thickened. I took a slow step back from the counter, like the ring might lash out on its own. But it's just a ring, I said, half to myself. Why would she? I didn't finish the question. The pawnbroker didn't need to hear the rest. My thoughts were already racing ahead of my mouth. Clarabelle. The perfect tea. The energy pills. Her soft reassurances. Her sudden shift from ambitious wife to doting caretaker. It all reassembled itself in my mind like a puzzle I'd been staring at upside down. And now, one piece had clicked into place, and the whole image was turning sickeningly clear. You need to go to the police, he said again, more firmly this time. Don't wait. Don't confront her. Don't give her the chance to explain. Just go. I stared at him, then down at the ring. It still looked beautiful, golden, smooth, flawless. Deceptively harmless. I picked it up with the edge of my sleeve and dropped it into a small plastic zip bag I had in my coat pocket, the one I used for carrying extra screws and pins when I was at work. My fingers were trembling. Thank you, I said, though the words barely formed. I didn't know. He nodded once. Most don't. That's the danger. It's not the kind of poison that screams. It waits. It lets you carry it. Trust it. Love it. That hit harder than I expected. I turned without another word and walked out of the shop, the bell above the door jingling like it had no idea the world had just tilted beneath my feet. Outside, the wind cut sharp across my face. I stood on the sidewalk, the bag with the ring clutched tight in my hand, my breath puffing out in uneven clouds. I couldn't go home. Not yet. I didn't even know what home meant anymore. I got back in my car and sat there for a long time, engine off, the silence pressing in around me. My thoughts were a blur, racing through memory after memory, scanning every interaction with Clarabelle over the last 6 months, trying to find the crack where the lie began. Was it when she started working late? When she suddenly said we should have more U.S. time? When she laughed too brightly at things that weren't funny? Or was it even earlier? Hidden beneath the quiet dinners and polite kisses and birthday gifts that were a little too perfect? I remember the way she'd held out the box that night. The way she said, "For your forever." I thought it was romantic. I thought it was love. But now it felt like a sentence. I called Marcus, my co-founder, but let it ring through. I wasn't ready to talk. Not to him. Not to anyone. I needed to think. To plan. Because if this was what I feared it was, then I wasn't just fighting for answers. I was fighting for my life. Eventually, I drove to a small motel off the highway. One of those places with neon vacancy signs and cigarette burns on the curtains. I paid cash and told the clerk I was just passing through. He didn't ask questions. I appreciated that. Inside the room, I sat on the bed and pulled out the zip bag, holding it up to the lamp. The ring looked back at me, innocent and silent. My reflection warped in the plastic like a ghost. I didn't know what my next move would be yet, but I knew this. I couldn't go home. Not while she still believed I was wearing it. Not while she still thought her plan was working. Whatever was happening, it had already gone too far. And if I was right, Clarabelle hadn't just betrayed me, she'd planned it. Carefully, methodically. I placed the ring in the motel safe and locked it, then sat back down and opened my phone. I started scrolling through Clarabelle's texts, trying to see what I hadn't seen before. Trying to decode the woman I thought I knew. It was only the beginning. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. After what the pawnbroker told me, the thought of walking through that front door made my chest tighten like a fist was curled around my lungs. Instead, I found myself holed up in a musty motel off Route 7, the kind of place where the walls were too thin and the curtains didn't close all the way. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the cracked ceiling while the hum of a faulty air conditioner filled the silence. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't scroll my phone. I just sat there, turning over one question again and again. Why would she do this? Clarabelle wasn't impulsive. That was never her style. Everything she did had polish, preparation, precision. She planned our wedding like a military operation. She tracked our finances down to the decimal. If this was happening, and I no longer had the luxury of pretending it wasn't, then she had thought it through. That ring wasn't just a twisted gift. It was a weapon, disguised in gold and sentiment. At some point past midnight, I pulled out my laptop and opened our shared phone bill. We'd had the same carrier for years, and Clarabelle always insisted on bundling everything into one account, for transparency, she said. I used to admire that. Now it felt like a cruel joke. I logged in and started scanning through call logs and data usage. Most of it was ordinary, work contacts, her mother, a few old friends. But one name kept popping up, Trent Marlowe. Trent was our accountant. Mid-30s, wore square glasses and loafers without socks. He was the kind of guy who smiled too long and always laughed at his own jokes. Clarabelle had never liked him. I remembered her calling him a creep after one dinner meeting, said he stared at her too much and didn't understand boundaries. So why, in the last 4 months, had she called him every week? Sometimes twice a day? I dug deeper, checked her location history, which she didn't know was syncing to her shared cloud. GPS pings from places she shouldn't have been. A coffee shop near Trent's office. A boutique hotel downtown. A quiet little bistro we'd once gone to for our anniversary, now showing up as a recurring dot on her timeline. Always during the day. Always when I was supposed to be at work. I opened the folder on my desktop where she'd once stored household receipts, groceries, utility bills, Target runs. She wasn't careful anymore. Maybe she thought I was too far gone to notice. There were receipts from restaurants I'd never been to, wine shops where she bought bottles I never tasted, and lingerie boutiques she never wore anything from in front of me. My stomach twisted as I stared at them, one by one, watching the reality sharpen around the edges. It wasn't just the ring. It was the tea, the supplements, the hovering presence, the sudden tenderness. All of it a performance. She wasn't trying to take care of me. She was trying to manage my decline. Steer it, soften it, make it clean. A nice, quiet spiral. And when it was over, I'd be gone. And she'd be the grieving widow with a hefty insurance check and a creep of an accountant waiting in the wings. I hadn't even considered the money until that moment, but now it screamed at me. I logged into our shared financial planner account. I knew all the passwords. Clarabelle never thought I paid attention to this stuff. I let her handle most of it, but I remembered enough. I searched for insurance policies, and there it was. Life insurance, Braxton Cole. Beneficiary, Clarabelle Cole. Value, $2.5 million. It had been updated 6 months ago, right around the time I started getting sick. I stared at the screen for a long time. My hand hovered over the trackpad, not even moving. I wasn't just a husband anymore. I was a target, an investment, a payout in waiting. When I finally moved again, it was to close the laptop slowly and place it on the nightstand. I lay back on the lumpy motel bed, staring at the water stain spreading across the ceiling. I thought about the woman I married. Her laugh, the way she used to press her forehead against mine when we were young and broke and full of ideas. I thought about the night we danced barefoot in the kitchen, eating takeout straight from the cartons. I thought about the way she used to look at me when she thought I wasn't watching. Had it all been real once? Or had I just fallen for the best performance of her life? I didn't sleep. Not really. When the sun finally broke through the stained curtain, I showered, dressed, and checked out without a word. I didn't go to work. I didn't call Marcus. I just drove, aimless at first, then purposeful. I needed proof. More than receipts. More than location logs. I needed something digital. Something she couldn't deny. So I called my cousin Juno. Juno worked in cybersecurity. Brilliant, sarcastic, always 2 steps ahead of everyone in the room. She picked up on the second ring. Braxton? Wow, haven't heard from you since the family reunion where Aunt Marie tried to baptize your bourbon. What's up? I need a favor, I said. A serious one. Is this one of those favors where I don't ask questions? No, I want you to ask questions. I need help figuring out just how deep my wife's betrayal goes. There was a pause. Then, I'll grab my laptop. I met her at a coffee shop across town, far from the places Clarabelle would go. I handed her a USB with a backup of Clarabelle's cloud storage, one I'd quietly downloaded while pretending to look for an old tax document months ago. Juno worked fast, fingers flying across the keys, muttering to herself. Within an hour, she found what I was afraid to see. Encrypted folders, private messages, hidden notes. One stood out immediately. A draft email to Trent. It's working. He's getting weaker. Soon. That was all I needed to read before my hands went cold. Juno looked at me, expression flat. Braxton, you need to call the cops. I nodded, swallowing the rising bile in my throat. She planned this, I said quietly. From the ring to the pills. She wanted me gone. And now I knew. And now I wasn't going to play along anymore. I didn't go to the police. Not yet. Not because I doubted the danger or because I didn't believe the evidence. I did. Every ache in my body, every empty stare from Clarabelle as she handed me another cup of tea, every line of that draft email Juno decrypted, proof stared me in the face like a cold breath on my neck. But I needed more. Not for the law. For myself. I needed to see it with my own eyes, to hear it from her voice, to feel the contours of her betrayal in the quiet moments where trust once lived. So I went back. Not like a fool. Not with the ring on. I played the role. The loving, worn-down husband. The one clinging to comfort. I drove home late that evening after Juno printed everything out, tucked it into a plain white envelope, and pressed it into my hand like a final warning. If anything happens, she said, this goes to Detective Ryland Singh. I already filled out the report. All you have to do is walk it in. I told her I would, but not yet. Clarabelle greeted me at the door with a radiant smile. Feeling better? She asked, brushing her fingers against my cheek. I was getting worried. A little, I said, managing a smile. I think I just needed a break. Cleared my head out near the coast. She looked at my hand almost immediately. You're not wearing your ring. Forgot it at the motel? I said, laughing lightly. Guess my head's still a little foggy. She chuckled. You and that ring? She murmured, then kissed my cheek and guided me into the living room. I made your favorite for dinner, rosemary chicken. Thought we could have a little welcome home night. I nodded. Sounds great. She didn't press about the motel or where I'd been. She assumed the ring would find its way back onto my finger. What she didn't know was that I had already replaced it. A near-identical copy ordered online in less than 10 minutes. Same width, same color, same engraving on the inside. I wore it now, plain and light, free of the metal laced with poison. That night, we ate at the kitchen table like nothing was wrong. I let her pour my wine. I let her lean against my shoulder as we watched some forgettable drama on Netflix. I even let her rub my temples and murmur about how she was just so glad I was home again. And I watched. Clarabelle had tells. Subtle ones. Her eyes twitched when she lied. Her smile tightened. She blinked just a little too often when she was unsure. Over the years, I'd learned to read her in ways she probably never realized. And now I read her with surgical precision. The next morning, I stirred my coffee at the island while she moved around the kitchen, humming some song I didn't recognize. She slid the tea toward me. I took it, smiled, pretended to sip. She leaned against the counter and studied me. You really do look better, she said, voice syrupy. Sleeping better too? Much better, I said, holding her gaze. Her eyes narrowed a fraction. And your energy's up? I feel like a new man. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I could see her calculating, testing the variables. I wore the ring. I drank the tea. And yet, I was improving, not declining. She didn't understand it yet, but I saw the beginning of doubt creep into her posture. A tiny frown at the corner of her mouth. The trap was working. Over the next few days, I gave her exactly what she needed to believe: a routine, predictability. I let her make me smoothies in the morning. I complimented the soup she ladled into my bowl. I took the pills she left out, palming them when she turned around and flushing them when she left the room. I even left the fake ring on the nightstand one morning, just to see what she'd do. When I came out of the shower, it was back on the dresser, polished and placed gently on a folded towel. Not a word from her. No reminder. No teasing. Just a silent reinforcement of control. But I had my own routines now. Every tea bag went into a plastic sandwich bag after use. Every pill I didn't swallow ended up in a sealed pouch tucked behind the HVAC vent. I was collecting, preserving, building my case while she thought I was falling back into her arms. I noticed her behavior changing subtly. She started checking her phone more often during meals, whispering when she thought I was asleep, slipping into the bathroom for longer than usual and coming out with a smile that didn't match the timing. She thought she had time. She thought her plan was still working. One night, as we curled into bed, she ran her fingers along my arm and whispered, "You're everything I ever wanted, Brax." I turned to her slowly and kissed her forehead. "You too." She exhaled softly, as if relieved. But I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark, listening to her breathe, feeling the weight of the fake ring against my finger, the memory of the real one still etched into my skin. I thought about the man I used to be. Blindly loyal, head down, always working, always believing. And I thought about the man I had become: watchful, methodical, silent. In the morning, she brought me toast and tea on a wooden tray. I took both, nodded my thanks, and watched her walk away. Her robe swished just slightly as she turned the corner out of the room. I took the tea to the bathroom, poured it into a mason jar, sealed it, and added it to my growing collection. She didn't know I was studying her. She didn't know the walls were closing in. She didn't know I'd already given Detective Ryland Singh a call. But I did. Juno was waiting for me when I pulled up to her apartment the next morning, a flash drive already in her hand. Her dark curls pulled into a messy bun like she hadn't slept all night. She probably hadn't. Her mind didn't work like most people's. Once something hooked her curiosity, she was relentless. She didn't smile when I walked in, just motioned for me to follow her to the kitchen table where her laptop sat open, screen flickering with decrypted folders and email threads that hadn't seen daylight in months. "You were right," she said, sliding the flash drive toward me like it was an explosive device. "She's not just planning it. She's halfway through executing it." I didn't speak. My throat was too dry. My fingers trembled slightly as I picked up the drive and turned it over in my hand. It weighed almost nothing, but it felt heavier than anything I'd ever carried. She used a shadow account, Juno continued, tapping on the keyboard. Separate email. Different cloud service. She masked it behind a dummy business, Everthorn Holdings. But your shared laptop was syncing some background activity. Lucky for us, she's not quite as clever as she thinks she is. I leaned in as the screen filled with files. PDFs, texts, photos, voice memos. Hidden corners of her life she tried to bury behind encryption and pretty smiles. Juno opened a document titled policy.pdf. It was straightforward. Cold. Life insurance policy. Insured, Braxton Cole. Amount, $2,500,000. Beneficiary, Clarabelle E. Cole. Effective, 6 months ago. She backdated it using forged physician statements. Juno said, claims you had a full checkup and were declared in excellent health. Except, there's no such doctor. I checked. She made him up. I ran a hand down my face. I felt tired, but not from lack of sleep. It was a deeper fatigue, the kind that comes when the life you thought you had gets stripped bare and you're left holding the bones. That's not all, she said, clicking open a series of Google search logs. Look at this. I leaned forward and read them silently. How long does thallium take to show symptoms? Poisoning through skin absorption. Slow-acting toxins in metal. Tea recipes that hide bitter taste. How to delete search history permanently. She planned the method before she even picked the poison, Juno said. She cross-referenced toxicity levels with alloy blending techniques. She even looked up metalwork vendors who might unknowingly use contaminated sources. I wanted to scream, or throw the laptop across the room. Instead, I just nodded. She's good, I said. She's dangerous, Juno corrected. And she's sloppy in just one way. She thinks she's smarter than everyone. That makes her predictable. She clicked open another file. A draft letter. It wasn't addressed, but the recipient was obvious from the tone. It's working. He's getting weaker. Soon. We just have to be patient. When it's done, we'll disappear for a while. Let the sympathy build. He has no idea. Just keep playing your part. I'll keep playing mine. Signed, C. Trent, I whispered. Juno nodded. Their emails don't mention his name directly, but they use the same burner phrases. She was meeting him at that hotel every Thursday at noon. I traced the timestamps and compared them to your location logs. You were either at work or sick in bed. They thought you'd never notice. A part of me still didn't want to believe it. Not completely. But the evidence was there, laid out in digital ink, cold and undeniable. I had been her project. A slow unraveling design to look like nature taking its course. And all for money. A new start. A clean slate with someone else while I disappeared 6 feet under. Do you have everything backed up? I asked, gripping the flash drive tightly. Triple, she said. One in my fireproof safe. One on a secure cloud. And that one in your hand. I wasn't taking any chances. I nodded. Good. You ready to bring it to the cops? Almost, I said. She looked at me, eyebrows raised. Braxton, don't wait too long. She's dangerous. This isn't a game. I knew that. Every time I felt the weight of that fake ring on my finger, every time I tasted the tea and pretended to swallow those pills, I reminded myself this wasn't about pride or vengeance. This was survival. But I needed to see it through. I needed to make sure there was no loophole. No excuse. No version of this story where she could say I misunderstood or manipulated the facts. I wanted to see her admit it. I wanted her to know I knew. And I wanted her to see that her plan was Fallon. I need one more thing, I said quietly. I need her to pack a bag for me. Juno blinked. What? I'm going to fake a business trip. I'll ask her to pack for me, include my lucky ring, maybe a fresh bottle of those vitamins she loves so much. Let her do it while thinking the plan is still on track. Then we test everything. The ring, the pills, the tea bags. I want the lab to have her fingerprints all over the evidence. Juno stared at me, then slowly nodded. That's cold. No, I said. That's survival. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You ever think maybe you should have gone into law enforcement? I gave her a small smile. I thought I was in love. Guess I'm learning how to adapt. As I left her apartment, I slid the flash drive into my inside coat pocket and zipped it closed. The sun was starting to rise, streaking the buildings in gold. A fitting color, I thought bitterly. The same color as the ring that almost killed me. I climbed into my car and sat there for a moment, breathing. Then I picked up my phone and texted Clarabelle. Me. Heading home early. Can you pack me a bag for the Atlanta trip? Need the pills and my lucky ring. You know the one. Thanks. She responded almost instantly. Clarabelle. Of course, love. I'll have it ready. Safe travels. Win those deals. Zoxo. I stared at the screen for a long time, my jaw clenched. I didn't respond. This wasn't about winning deals. This was about ending the game. The morning I left for the trip, Clarabelle kissed me like everything was normal. Like she hadn't tried to kill me in slow, quiet increments. Like she hadn't just sealed a travel bag packed with the tools of her own undoing. The way she smiled as she zipped the duffel made my stomach churn. She didn't know she was packing evidence. Didn't know she'd signed the last page of her own confession letter with that wink and the words, "Can't win those deals without your lucky ring." The bag was in the back seat now. I hadn't opened it. I didn't need to. The Rio ring was in there. The poison one, along with a fresh bottle of energy supplements, which I was sure would test positive for something fatal in small, repeated doses. Clarabelle had been consistent. Predictability was the cornerstone of her design. She wanted to be remembered as careful, calculated, precise. She told herself that slow death looked more like nature than malice. But the beauty of her predictability was that it made her easy to trap. I didn't head to the airport. Instead, I drove straight to the precinct. Detective Ryland Singh looked younger than I expected. Sharp eyes, clipped voice, but with the kind of presence that made people hesitate before they lied. His office was small and windowless, but he kept it organized, files stacked neatly, mug ring permanently etched into his desk like a badge of routine. He offered me a seat and waited. I didn't make him wait long. I handed him the flash drive, then the bag. My voice didn't shake as I laid it out. The pawn shop warning, the symptoms, the fake ring, the tea bags I'd stored, the vitamins I hadn't taken, the fake trip, the texts, the files Juno found, the insurance policy, the search history, the draft letters, the receipts, the name, Trent Marlowe. Singh didn't interrupt. He let me speak until the room felt like it had shrunk to the size of a confession booth. Then he leaned back in his chair and exhaled through his nose. "You're telling me your wife has been poisoning you slowly for 6 months? With a ring? With pills? With drinks?" "Yes." "And she doesn't know you know?" "No, not yet." He nodded slowly. "We'll get the contents tested. The ring, the pills, the tea. You said you never swallowed any of them?" "Not after the first few weeks. I started flushing them. The symptoms disappeared when I stopped wearing the ring and taking the pills." "And the ring you're wearing now?" "Replica. Real one's in the bag." Singh took a long look at me, then opened a file and began writing. "You're lucky. If that alloy has thallium, like your pawn guy suspects, we're not just looking at attempted murder. We're looking at premeditated poisoning with intent to collect. That's federal. Add the insurance fraud, the conspiracy, and if her partner flips, we could see this unfold into a textbook long-game prosecution." I just sat there, letting the words wash over me. I didn't feel lucky. I felt empty, like I'd been hollowed out and refilled with someone else's resolve. "We'll need to monitor her," Singh continued. "She thinks you're gone, right? Thinks you're out of town for business." "Correct. Then we watch. We gather her communications. She'll contact him. We'll be listening. When we have enough, we go in. And if she tries something before then, we'll have an officer stationed nearby. But for your safety, I'd like you off the radar. Somewhere quiet." "Do you have a safe place you can stay?" "My cousin," I said. "Juno. She's the one who found the files." He nodded. "Stay there. Keep your phone on. If she contacts you, do not respond. We need to preserve the illusion." I stood, a slow tension curling through my back as I adjusted to what I had just done, what I had started. What happens if she confesses? Singh looked up. "Then we don't stop her." I left the precinct with a strange sense of weightlessness. Not relief. Not yet. But a shift. Like the moment before thunder, when the air changes pressure and you know something is coming. I drove to Juno's apartment, let her take my phone, and handed over everything the detective had asked for. She didn't say much. Just wrapped me in a hug and whispered, "You're doing the right thing." 2 days passed. I stayed in the guest room, barely sleeping, barely eating, just listening to the ticking of the wall clock and the humming of my thoughts. Singh called on the 3rd day. "She's talking," he said. "Text to Trent. Coded at first, then more direct. Today, she sent him this." He read it aloud. "Clarabelle. All clear. He's out of the way. Papers filed. When this settles, we talk next steps. Be patient. I'll handle the rest." I closed my eyes, a flicker of rage darting behind them like heat lightning. "When do you take her in?" "Soon. We want her relaxed. Confident. That's when mistakes happen. But we'll get her. And you'll be safe." "Trent?" I asked. "He's a coward. He'll flip. Probably already planning to. They always do when the walls close in." I hung up and sat in silence for a long time. It was surreal, hearing her words without her voice, seeing her betrayal in black and white texts. I thought of our wedding vows, of the honeymoon we spent walking barefoot along the coast, of the night she cried when I got sick and said she'd never leave me. And all along, she was waiting for me to die. It wasn't just the attempt. It was the performance that stung. The way she poured tea like it was an act of love. The way she smiled when she handed me poison. The way she said forever and meant just until the check clears. I didn't cry. I didn't break. I just waited. The trap was almost set. The cage was almost closed. And Clarabelle had no idea she'd walked into it herself. It was a sunny Thursday, warm enough for sunglasses and linen dresses, the kind of day Clarabelle would have chosen for a celebration. She was seated at a marble patio table in one of those downtown cafes where the servers wore bow ties and the menu is printed on recycled parchment. Trent Marlowe sat across from her, laughing into his mimosa like he didn't have a care in the world. They looked like a couple on the cusp of something, a new chapter, a fresh start. They thought I was dead weight turned vapor. They thought their plan had worked. Detective Ryland Singh had set everything up. Surveillance team in place. Audiobooks primed. Phones tapped. He told me to stay put, to let justice run its course, but I couldn't resist. I needed to see it. I needed the final image burned into my memory, the one that would overwrite every fake smile and poisoned kiss. So I sat 2 cafes down in a borrowed baseball cap and tinted glasses, my heart pounding like a war drum. They looked comfortable. Clarabelle leaned in with that practiced tilt of her head, touching Trent's wrist lightly, her laugh ringing out like music. It had always been a weapon, her charm. Disarming. Warm. She could smile while twisting the knife, and people would thank her for the pain. And then, mid-sip, everything changed. Detective Singh approached from the sidewalk. No fanfare, no sirens. Just a man in a dark blazer walking with certainty. 2 officers flanked him. Their badges flashed so fast the other diners barely had time to register what was happening before it was over. Clarabelle Cole? Singh said, calm as ever. She looked up, blinking. Still in control. Yes. You're under arrest for attempted murder, insurance fraud, and conspiracy to commit a felony. There was a beat, a brief flicker where she smiled, confused. Then it hit her. What? I think there's been some kind of mistake, she said, her voice high but still composed. I'm sorry. What is this about? You'll have time to discuss it at the station. Hands where I can see them. Trent froze. He didn't even move to help her. He just stared like a man watching his life detonate in real time. Clarabelle turned to him, expecting backup, some kind of protest, but he was already shrinking into his seat. This is ridiculous, she snapped, standing now. This is a prank, right? Performance art? She looked around, searching for cameras. Is this a setup? Because this isn't funny. Braxton's out of town. Singh didn't flinch. We have evidence, Mrs. Cole. Extensive evidence. The ring, the pills, the altered insurance documents. And your text messages. She hesitated. We have your communication with Trent Marlowe. Your internet history. Your drafts. Your packaging receipts. And we have medical documentation that proves Braxton Cole was being exposed to thallium via an alloy in the ring you gave him. Do you want to keep denying it? I could see her face begin to splinter. Her lips parted, her brow tightened. She looked at Trent again, desperate now. But it was too late. He had already pulled out his phone and placed it on the table. I want to cooperate, he said quickly. I didn't know she was. She told me he was already sick, that it wasn't her fault. Singh turned his head slowly. You'll make your statement at the precinct. Clarabelle's face contorted. Not panic. Not yet. Something worse, realization. Her mouth opened and closed. Her hands, manicured and trembling, reached for the chair behind her as if steadying herself on reality. And then finally, she looked around the street. Her eyes landed on me. Even in the hat and glasses, she saw me. That kind of recognition wasn't born from appearance. It came from knowing someone's soul. Her gaze locked with mine like a question she was too scared to ask. I didn't move. I let her look. Let her see that I was alive. That I knew. That I had always known. No, she whispered, just loud enough that I saw her lips shape it. No, you. But I turned away. That was the moment I had waited for. Not revenge, not victory, just the crumbling. The break between the mask and the truth. I didn't need to hear her confess. I had everything I needed in that look. That second where her illusion shattered. Back at the precinct, Singh called to update me. She didn't resist after that. She went quiet. Lawyered up immediately. But the lab results are clean and conclusive, traces of thallium in the ring and in the pills. She's done. And Trent? I asked. Cracked in 20 minutes. Said everything was her idea. That he just got caught up. Gave us full access to his communications. Clarabelle's facing 25 years minimum. Could be more if we push for federal charges. She'll likely try to cut a deal. I sat in Juno's guest room after the call, staring out the window as the afternoon sun dimmed. She brought me tea, real tea, and left it on the windowsill without saying a word. I didn't drink it. Not because I didn't trust her, but because the habit had already formed. Suspicion lived in me now. Later that night, I looked through the folder Singh had dropped off. Photos of the ring in the lab. Lab results. Copies of Clarabelle's messages. One file stood out. Surveillance footage from the pawn shop. Grainy, but clear. There I was, months ago, switching the ring at the counter. The first move. The moment I decided to live. That video had broken the case. Singh said when they showed it to Clarabelle, after the arrest, after the charges, she stopped speaking. She just stared at the screen and shook her head, like the truth had blindsided her. She really thought I'd die quietly, that I'd never question her kindness, that I'd wear the ring, drink the tea, and fade into memory while she cashed in on my life. But I didn't. I adapted. I watched. And when the time came, I exposed her. Now, she'd spend her years behind bars, not brunch tables. And every time she closed her eyes, I hoped she'd see that moment. The one where she looked up from champagne and saw me watching. Alive. Free. Unforgiving. I keep it on the middle shelf of my nightstand, in a box no larger than a matchbook. Silver, no engraving, no false promises carved into its skin. Just a simple band. Cool, honest, weightless in comparison to the one that nearly killed me. Some days, I wear it on my right hand. Other days, I leave it tucked away. But I never forget it's there. I suppose it's not about the ring itself. It's about the reminder. The case wrapped faster than I expected. Clarabelle's team tried to bargain, but there was nothing left to negotiate with. Too many receipts, too many texts, too many lies that had been preserved like glass shards under microscope. Trent, in classic coward fashion, gave a full confession in exchange for reduced sentencing. He painted Clarabelle as the mastermind, the manipulator. Maybe he was right. Maybe he was just rewriting the story to save himself. Either way, it didn't matter anymore. She'd already told on herself. Through every file, every digital footprint, every casual suggestion to make my tea instead of letting me brew it myself. They gave her 25 years. No parole until you're 18. I didn't go to the sentencing. I didn't need to see her in handcuffs again, shoulders slumped, mouth pressed into that tight line she used to wear when things didn't go her way. Singh offered to walk me through the transcript. I declined. Some chapters are better left unread once they close. I didn't want her voice to be the last word on this. I wanted mine to be. Juno came with me the day I picked up my things from the old house. The one Clarabelle and I once remodeled together, painting walls while barefoot and bickering over backsplash tile. I walked through it like it belonged to someone else. Like the memories lived on in a TV show I'd only half watched. In the kitchen drawer, I found the original ring carefully bagged and sealed by evidence officers. I didn't touch it, just stared at it for a long minute before slipping it into the return envelope and shipping it back to Singh. He said it might go to a museum one day. Exhibit A in a story about invisible betrayal, he joked. Clarabelle wrote me once. A letter. Somehow, the script was still perfect, graceful loops, clean pressure, elegant phrasing. She started it with Dear Braxton, like we were still having coffee on a Sunday morning. She wrote about regret, about confusion, about how she never meant for it to go so far. She didn't apologize. Not really. The words weren't there. She just tried to twist it all into something poetic, as if the poisoning was an accident of emotion, not a plan carved in metal and steeped in chamomile. I didn't respond. Instead, I returned to something simpler. Quiet days, morning runs, coffee without checking for bitterness. I rebuilt the business without Marcus. He stepped down after I confronted him about his own shady dealings. Not criminal, but cowardly. He claimed he didn't know what Clarabelle was doing, but he sure didn't ask questions when the firm's shares started leaning her way. I bought him out. I started taking meetings again, one client at a time. No rush, no pressure. I looked people in the eye now in ways I hadn't before. Because once you've been lied to by someone who kissed your forehead goodnight, the world stops intimidating you. People ask if I'll ever get married again. I smile when they do. Not because the idea is funny, but because I genuinely don't know the answer. I've learned that love can be both a home and a battlefield, that it can tuck you in at night while slowly cutting away at your breath. But I've also learned that it's not love that betrayed me. It was the illusion of it. Clarabelle was a storm in a silk dress, a tragedy with a perfect laugh. I loved her because I wanted to believe we were invincible. And I left her behind because I finally believed in myself more than I feared losing her. There's a park near my new place. Nothing fancy, just a patch of green with a duck pond and a bench where old men play chess. I go there sometimes, sit for a while, watch the kids run and the dogs bark and the couples walk by holding hands like promises they haven't had to question yet. One afternoon, I met a woman there. Her name was Elise. She sat beside me, not saying anything at first, just opened a book and read quietly while the world moved around us. Eventually, we talked. She asked me what I did. I told her I used to run a business, that I was recovering from some things. She didn't push. She just nodded and said, "We all are." We've had coffee a few times since then. Nothing serious. No declarations. No rings. Just time. And truth. And silence that feels like peace, not punishment. When I take the silver ring out of its box, I don't think of Clarabelle. Not exactly. I think of what I survived. Of the version of me that refused to die quietly. I think of the pawn shop. Of Juno's messy hair and fireproof safe. Of Sing's steady voice. Of the morning Clarabelle saw me from the cafe table and realized her ghost was alive and watching. I wear the ring not to remember her, but to remember me. To remember the man who paid attention. Who stopped smiling through symptoms. Who chose to trust his gut over his guilt. Who swapped a poison band for one that meant nothing and everything at the same time. Evil doesn't always wear a scowl. Sometimes it wears perfume and kisses your temple. Sometimes it brings you tea. Sometimes it wraps itself in velvet and hands you a ring engraved with forever. But I know now forever is a choice, not a guarantee, not a gift. And sometimes, the only vow worth keeping is the one you make to yourself.